Hello and welcome to What's on My Mind with Fiona. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. I've got a few things I wanted to talk about today, a few things that are in the news. So, one of those things is this week in New South Wales, in Australia. For those of you who are, I'm in Sydney, New South Wales, a state in Australia. What we had is we pretty much lined up with the rest of the country in regards to a sex self ID bill. So essentially, our government put through it was what they called it. It was the Equality Legislation Amendment for LGBTIQA plus Bill 2023, and essentially they pushed it through. It got through this week, and I am appalled that it did. It is said to be a safeguard for LGBT children, that kind of thing, but it's the opposite of that. So what this bill says is that you can actually, including children, you can just change your birth certificate to whatever sex you want, essentially. And there's so many problems with this, right? So first of all, I think that birth certificates should be accurate. Now, if there was some issue with someone who has DSD, I've talked about it before, disordered sex development, which used to be called intersex, and it turns out that the birth certificate was wrong for that reason. That's the only reason I could think that it would make sense to go back and actually change it if it was wrong in the first place. But this is changing it because in your mind you think it's wrong, not because it's wrong. The problem with changing it is that so there's all the things. There's all the things to do with how we tally numbers of things for health, for schools, for planning, the rest of it, and how we measure things about women's health, whatever. There's things such as and I know in a lot of places when they're putting together data and statistics about crimes, all of a sudden there's a big increase in women's violent crime, right? And it's not women, it's men dressed up as women, right? So there's all these different things where numbers get fudged and numbers change. And so it's just not true. It's inaccurate. When you stop telling the truth, then you tell lies. And then what happens is your data, your information, everything you're sharing becomes a lie, right? But the other issue in regards to the kids is that, so their argument was that if you allow children to socially change, like what's it called, socially. My brain's not doing it, but socially transition, right? So that you let them start calling themselves a different name, you let them change their birth certificate, that kind of thing. They say, well, that will protect them from going further, from wanting to have the surgeries and hormones and that sort of stuff. So that's what they claim. So you don't make them have to have surgeries and things to change their birth certificate. That's not fair. Let them just change their birth certificate. So it saves them from having to have those surgeries. And so they're kind of saying, well, you're forcing them to have the surgery, so that they can change their birth certificate. Well, the issue with that is the data doesn't confirm that. So again, when you look back at Hilary Cass's report, the Cass report, which is done in the UK, very thorough 4-year report, what she found was that once you allow a child to socially transition, there's a much higher chance they're going to go ahead and do all of the rest of it, right? And for a whole bunch of reasons. Once you've gone along with the delusion, right? If you go along with someone's delusion, it's more chance that they're going to go ahead with it, isn't there? Rather than learning how to understand what is really going on for them. A lot of these kids, they've been sexually assaulted, or they've got autism, or there's actually a social contagion amongst girls in the world in regards to this. There's a whole bunch of reasons why a girl might be, or a boy, but with girls there's a particular social contagion. A whole bunch of reasons why people might be going down this path. So just simply just assuming that they're right when they say that they think they're the other sex. So there's a lot of things I thought when I was a child, and I was wrong. I thought I was right, but I was wrong, right? So what we do know is that if we support them, if we support the delusion, then it's more likely to happen. Also, it's more likely to happen because once you start going down the path, then you feel like you can't let people down. So you feel like, and also with their group that they're in, so they get love bombed by the whole the online and the sort of all of the LGBT what would you call them, all of the people involved in this activism. they support you a lot once you put your hand up and say that you're one of them. If you start saying you have doubts, or if you say I was wrong, I want to detransition, or whatever it is, they kick you out. And not only do they kick you out, but they tear you apart. They absolutely tear you apart. So you go from having, so these kids are often just like they're kids and they're having problems with their parents, blah, blah, blah. They get talking to some horrible creature like Jeffrey Marsh. Check him out. He's revolting online. These creatures that they say things like, they say this is YouTube videos, right? People get banned on YouTube videos for saying all sorts of stuff. Well, these people, they say, you can't trust your parents, but you can trust me. And, pay my Patreon or whatever and join and we can talk privately. They're encouraging children to talk to them instead of their parents, right? Grooming much? So anyway, kids for a whole bunch of reasons, just not trusting their parents, angry at their parents, whatever, and they get talking to these people online to convince them that the solution to all of their problems is the fact that they're in the wrong body. And then when they sort of say, oh, yes, I am, okay, great, then they get showered with lots of love bomb, all that sort of stuff. They get sort of to be part of a community. And if they feel quite isolated, or if they feel quite different, which so many of us do, who doesn't feel different when you're a teen, right? So if suddenly you're part of a community and you're accepted and people are showering love on you and they think you're wonderful and they're giving you all the support in the world, you don't want you won't want to let them down, right? And you don't want to be kicked out of the tribe, and you are kicked out of the tribe. It's a bit like telling a group of vegans that you're not a vegan anymore. It's the same thing happens, right? So essentially what happens, you get kicked out of the tribe and really treated very, very badly. And then they start putting out stories about you and undermining you and saying all sorts of things, especially if you go public, right? So the cost to detransitioning, or the cost to not transitioning, the cost to changing your mind is quite high. Also, the cost, if you can imagine, if you've changed within your family and at your school and all the rest of it, and you've made your parents different clothes, and you've had all the difficult conversations with your grandparents and this people and that people, you've put your family and your friends and your school through all of this change, and now you're going to say, oh, look, I think I was wrong. So the truth is that, based on the CAST report, we know that they tend to, the more that it's affirmed, the more that we let them socially transition, the more that they get into it, the harder it is to reverse. And even if they want to, right? So the less transitioning you do, even social transitioning, the less you do, the better it is. So this whole we need self-ID thing to save the kids. No, it doesn't save the kids. Look, the other issue is too, and I've been hearing about it this week in the UK and in Australia, and it's probably in other places as well. Again, I was listening to Andrew Gold's Heretics this week, and he was talking to a young woman who essentially her father is a predator, and he groomed her, and I won't go into the detail, listen to it, but he just did dreadful, dreadful things to his daughter for many, many years over her whole life. And he went to prison, and when he went to prison, he decided he was a she instead of a he, changed his name. He changed his name to the name of a really prominent female activist in the UK. So he was trolling, right? He was really trying to he was laughing at, the whole thing. But no, they supported him. He got lots of support. He got out of prison early because he was just such a lovely person, and they thought he was great. And so he actually got out of prison early. He's getting to live as a woman now. If they look at his record, so if anyone looks up his record, so say he applies for a job at a school, and they do the police check, whatever, it comes up clear. So not only do they get to change their name, but in a lot of cases it would appear that they don't attach their old name and their old record to the new name. So these men, so this is the thing, okay, again, what happens is people say, oh, that's not me, people do that, and it's not, and it's, you're picking on people, and like, I'm not saying that all people who transition and all people who are trans and all that are bad and evil people, not at all. However, all of these laws, all of this support around this gives way to people like this man who clearly took advantage of it, right? It's giving them permission to do this. It's giving them an entry into women's spaces. It's ensuring that we can't check their police record and make sure that they can't be around children. So that guy can now just, now he calls himself Lucy or whatever the name was. He can be around children as much as he wants to, right? So he can just go and damage more children, right? So the problem is it's that whole thing, you might have a 100 foxes who want to dress as sheep, and what they're saying is that most of them are kind and nice and they're going to be good to the sheep, and that may be absolutely true. However, as the farmer, are you going to let those 100 foxes in with the sheep based on the fact that most of them will be all right? You only need one, right? It's going to kill all your sheep, right? So, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, so that most of them are good people, but so we let them all in the space, and we let them all in the space with women and children. And, oh, well, some of them aren't good. And, oh, well, some women and children will have all sorts of horrific things done to them, but it's worth it just to be kind. Be kind to who, right? Always comes back to who are we being kind for? Like, we're only kind, you can only be kind and inclusive and compassionate to one type of person, and everybody else, too bad. So essentially now you can change your birth certificate in New South Wales. So now men can access female-only spaces, services and sports. This is now enshrined in law, which is going to make it even harder for women to defend their spaces. And more women and girls are self-excluding. Their stories of young girls who say, like, I'm not going to go to do sport anymore because I'm uncomfortable in the change rooms because there's men in the change rooms. They don't like going to the change rooms and seeing a man's junk. Funny that. And of course, that young girl must be a bigot. It can't be that, she's a young girl and she shouldn't have to see that. No, that's like not okay. And if it was a straight guy wanting to go and be in the change room and show off his junk to your daughter, that would be a problem, right? But if it's a guy, and it should be a problem, right? But if it's a guy who identifies as a woman, he's brave and wonderful, and it's like it's all they have to do is just like wave a magic wand and say, "Oh, I'm a woman now," and now they're brave, and now they're courageous, and now we just give them entry into everywhere. What the actual? One day we're going to look back at this time, and we're going to have a serious what the actual conversation about this. Like, I don't understand why we're not having the conversation now, but we're trying to. But we're just going to say, how did we do this? Why did we do this? The other thing that happened in the news this week actually is, I think his name is Josh Seater. I don't know if it's how you pronounce his name, but he was like a bachelor type person in one of those shows a few years ago, and he's been a bit of a online getting attention, and I think he had a kind of a death hoax thing that I don't know if he was involved in or not, but anyway, obviously likes a lot of attention. And what he did recently, which I suppose time will tell whether it was useful or not, but he just as a troll, he pretended he was transitioned to become a woman, and he just absolutely trolled the hell out of it. He did it for about 5 months. He just came out the other day and said, yeah, I was just trolling because I wanted to see how far I could get away with it. And he could get away with a lot. So it'd be interesting to see him talk more and more about that and what came up with that. But, as soon as they say that, oh, yeah, I'm a woman now, and he puts on this ridiculous makeup and a dress and he's got the beard and everything, and everyone's, oh, you're so brave, you're so wonderful, oh, you're a hero, and now suddenly they can be in women's spaces and girls' spaces and that sort of thing. So that was kind of funny. There's been a few over the years that I thought were trolling, and I thought he might have been as well, but then I don't know if they were, but this one he was pointing out how absurd the whole thing is, that, yesterday he was identifying as a woman, therefore he can do what he wants in women's spaces. Today he identifies a man, now he can't, it's this arbitrary thing because the person decides to or not to, yes. Anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about this week, I suppose changing the topic a bit, and something that's a bit sad, is that a couple of days ago, I think his name is Liam from One Direction, a young sort of pop star who, he's sort of was 31, I think. Anyway, he's passed away, and I don't know, misadventure, choice. I don't quite know what happened, but clearly from what I can see. There was a history of he's had some mental health issues and some relationship issues, that kind of stuff. Really, really sad. And look, I'm not going to talk about him specifically because I don't know much about him, and rest in peace, all the rest of it. Like, I don't know, but just in general, children going into the arts, children going into like Hollywood, it's a bad idea. Or Hollywood, like music, all of that stuff. You only have to look at the recent Diddy things. Excuse me. You only have to look at the recent arrest of Diddy and Puff Daddy, what's his name, Sean Combs, and you see some of those videos now of him with Justin Bieber or him with Usher and people like that when they were quite young. Justin Bieber also comes across as someone who's very damaged, and now looking at the whole Diddy stuff, because I didn't know much about any of this stuff, you can kind of see how that sort of came about. There's been many, many, many people in the industry who went into the industry, became famous when they were children, basically. Becoming famous when you're a child is really, really bad for you, in my opinion, based on the results, based on what you see, especially if you're not protected, especially if you don't have someone around who's with you all the time and making sure that and even if someone protects you and like nothing is actually like happens to you, because what was it there? Is it not Disney, but the other channel? Anyway, they had there's a big show on about them not long ago, and all these child stars from the 90s and all the awful things that were done to them. And there's kind of like executives that kind of go to prison for interfering with children, and then they come out of prison and get a job. Like there was one that got a job at one of these, what are they called? It's not Disney, it's the other one of the other ones. Anyway, the stuff that they get away with. So anyway, I'm not even talking about the direct kind of like the people who do awful things to those children. It's not even just that. It's actually not even just that. Like obviously that's huge and that's terrible and it's rife and it's wrong and something should be done about it. So just, well, of course, right? So I just don't want to sound like I'm not acknowledging that. What I was trying to say is that just even before you add that, and even if the child is kept safe from that, it's the whole thing of growing up in the spotlight, right? And it's the whole thing of becoming, if you from a very young age, suddenly people start idolizing you and you don't even know who you are and people are idolizing you, I think that would be a real right? I honestly think it would be. And then you're trying to figure yourself out, you're trying to work yourself out. And these kids are usually, they're at the parties and there's all the drugs and alcohol and everything anyway. So they get exposed to a lot of that, which makes it even worse, right? But you're trying to figure yourself out. You've become really famous. Suddenly you've got all these hangers-oners. So whether or not they're adults who want to make money from you or want to get famous from you, or whether or not it's all your new best friends who want to be your friends and they're not really friends, that sort of thing. They have this thing where suddenly all the old friends want to become their best friend and want them to buy stuff. And, suddenly everyone wants to use you. Suddenly everyone wants you for something, right? So they have that happen. And so there's this very confusing thing that happens with all their friends and acquaintances. And then they sort of find out who their real friends are or whatever, because when that starts to hit the fan and their lives start to unravel, a lot of those friends disappear, funnily enough. But yeah, they just become, everyone thinks they're wonderful and everyone idolizes them, but no one really knows them. And it must be very hard for them to make friendships after that and know who they can trust. And, it's really tricky. I think too, you see the people who do well in that industry are often the people who were adults when they made it, and where they were adults who had fully formed sense of selves, fully formed values, and possibly already families by then, to their own families. So they might have been married to someone who really grounded them, and have a family, and a family grounds you, all that sort of stuff. So the people who have that, when they get famous, tend to do better because they've got that kind of grounding family. They've got that sense of self, and they also kind of see Hollywood or the industries or whatever for what they are, right? So they don't get caught up in it. They don't start believing their own they don't start believing, that they're perfect and wonderful, and they don't get caught up in and taken for a ride by all these people around them. And and even then, I think for those people, it must be really, really tough. So I think we kind of see fame as being this wonderful thing, and it's funny because these days a lot of kids, they want to be famous. That's what their goal is. Now, I wouldn't mind having the money, but I don't want the fame, not that level of fame. I don't want that. I really that what it cut the cost of that, I think, is just huge. And then everyone hates you, and then once you start getting really popular, lots of people hate you, and other people will love you and adore you, and it's like they don't even know me, but they love me, and it must be very confusing. So I personally think that it's unsafe for children to be in that world, in the world of fame and fortune, and I think talented children are better off if they're sort of kept out of all that as much as possible until they're old enough and stable enough to be able to go into that world and survive, because I think it really is a survival thing. And when you see like the movie stars and things who seem to be the most well balanced and the most sensible, they're often the ones that don't live in Hollywood. They kind of live outside of Hollywood and they just have real lives on their farm somewhere or whatever with the chooks, as opposed to chooks are chickens. By the way, in Australia we call them chooks. Just sounds like, what's a chook? Um, they're those people, as opposed to the uh, the ones that live in the bubble, the Hollywood bubble, and and you just see over time they just spend so much time in the bubble that they absolutely lose reality, and they're giving us all this advice about politics and this and that and whatever, and they all live in their kind of gated communities with their security and with their private jets, and then they're all telling us what we should and shouldn't do, what we should and shouldn't eat, or who we should vote for, or all that kind of stuff. It's ridiculous. So that's the other thing too. We idolize people who they might be really, really good at singing. They might be really, really good at acting or dancing or whatever they're good at. And great, that's wonderful, and you can enjoy that. Doesn't mean they're really smart about other things. It doesn't mean they know politics. It doesn't mean that you have to vote for who they vote for. Choose who you want to vote for based on who you think is best, not based on a pop star or whatever. They're just people. They're just people who are really, really good at something, and that you might be enjoy watching, listening to, whatever it is. But yeah, they're only human, so don't turn them into idols, because they're really not. They're just people. And yeah, anyway, my opinion is I think children. It's not a good place for children to be. The fame stuff is not a good and safe and healthy place for children to be, and you'd have to be a very, very good clever parent to be able to navigate that with a child and get them through to the other side. And even then, if you protect them from all the predators and stuff, I think just that whole thing of being famous as a child, even if you are protected in all the other ways, I think it still would be really damaging. Honestly, I think yeah, that's my opinion. And it would be interesting at some point to, like, if someone does a study, maybe someone is doing studies, but look at all of the Hollywood child stars, look at what's happened in the music industry or whatever. Look at who did well, who didn't, and look at the strategies that were used, or the strategies that they had, or the resources that they had, so you can get a feel for the sort of things that are really damaging and the sort of things that aren't. And if children are really talented and they want to be doing these things at a younger age, is there a safer way for them to do it? I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, just RIP to Liam. I feel really sad for him and his family and his fans. And it's just really, really sad. And it's not the first one we've seen, and it won't be the last one, unfortunately. And it's sad that yeah, there's not. And as kind of these people, they become famous. People make lots of money out of them. People get fame, fortune, whatever, and then uh, and then a lot of people desert them. I'm not talking about the specific situation, because I don't know the situation, and when people have drug and alcohol problems or violence or things like that, I also understand why they get deserted for that reason. But I think you get what I'm saying. Anyway, I think I will leave it at that for this week. But they're the things that have been on my mind this week, and yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts about children going into those industries, and what you think of the sex ID bill, now that anyone in Australia can just change their birth certificate if they want to, and have absolute legal access to women's and girls' spaces. So I think we're absolutely going backwards there. It's like, oh my God, there's all these marches about, safety for women and reclaim the night, and making sure that, all the stuff about believe all women, and about victims and all that sort of stuff, which, great, wonderful. But then they have all this, and then the same people, because it is the same people, who are the kind of far left, then will bring in something like this and invite all of the foxes into the sheep's pen kind of thing. Yes. Anyway, that weird. Anyway, all right. I will leave it at that. I hope you have a great week, and please like, subscribe, share, all of that sort of stuff. And I'll talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye.